A few miles west of the border, the woodland grew thick. The strong glucose smell of amber surrounded the skyscrapers that grew, almost like paradise in New York City. Fields of lush, emerald, uncut grass could be seen on the other side of the border, no matter where you stood because of the bright green colors. Sluggish streams surrounded the forest, snaking and twisting in all different directions, almost making you lose sense of direction. It was beautiful. Caroling birds chirped at the top of the trees, echoing off each tree, making it audible for everyone to hear. The wind rustled through the sunflame gold leaves, carrying the birds' songs into the distance with it. On the other side of the woodland sat a suspiciously tall mountain, its peak covered in unkempt emerald fields of glory. The forest sat at the bottom, swallowing it up. This made the scenery unbelievably attractive to visitors. The forest thinned out in the middle, almost like a separation, which was carried down from the mountain, separated the two sides, with one single bridge connecting the two. The bridge was old, dry and slick. Feathery combs of moss covered most parts of it, making the journey across treacherous. The bright, soaring ball of fire which stood high in the sky dried the moss a little, making it seem safe, but that was just deception. The river below gleamed brightly, sparkling in the sunlight. Also deception. In reality, it was deadly. The water cascaded over and around the rocks that lay stuck in its path, gaining speed and strength every second. As the water slashed up to the sides, it stole stones and sand and kept a tight grasp on them as it carried along its path to the end. There were many gravel paths crossing their way throughout the woodland. And that's where she was. Walking with her dog. The golden retriever had long scruffy hair with dark brown eyes. He walked behind her cautiously with a large twig in his mouth. She carried on ahead, stepping over any loose roots from trees, careful not to trip over. It hadn't rained in weeks, so the mud on the ground was cracked and dry. As they followed the trail, they were strolling closer and closer to the bridge. She couldn't have known taking this path instead of the one leading up the mountains would change her life forever. She stood at the end of the bridge, ready to cross, when something caught her dog's attention and he went running toward the water. After seeing how ruthless the water was, she went running after him. And that's when she stopped dead in her tracks. There it was. The life changer. A body hung from the edge of the bridge, covered in dried blood, with some still dripping from his clothes into the water beneath. The river was trying to pull him down, but the rope around his neck was too tight, so it was just slicing slowly through his flesh. She screamed. She swung her backpack off her shoulders, unzipped the bag and started scuffling around. Then she pulled out her phone and said, "Siri, call emergency services." Her phone replied, "Okay Sarah, calling emergency services." The sirens were blaring in the distance, getting closer by the minute. Sarah was sat by the water's edge, still in shock. She physically couldn't move, frozen. The sun was starting to set over the horizon toward the border, darkness replacing it, and the warmth the sun was providing was starting to disappear rapidly, letting the cold creep in. After what seemed like a lifetime, the emergency services finally arrived, lighting up the area with blue from the vivid lights that were fixed onto the top of the vehicles.
Then, what was happened? Please go ahead.
Then, the policemen sprawled out of their cars and vans and started to get to work. They cordoned the area off with tape, stopping the public from getting into the area whilst they worked tirelessly. They set up a perimeter so the public knew not to travel on certain paths that lead to the scene. The area was secure. They continued to inspect the scene and gather as much evidence as possible whilst the EMT checked Sarah. They gave her a blanket as the temperature had dropped a lot, now hovering above freezing. It was dark now, so the police had to set out professional night lights so they could see what they were doing, with the light penetrating through the forest. A group of around 5 proceeded toward the body, wrapped up in protective clothing, careful not to contaminate any evidence even though the river would have already done some of that. 2 of the 5 weighted themselves up and started to descend into the river to help detach the body from the rope, whilst the other 3 started, attentively, pulling the body up, wrapping the body up in white cloth to protect the body and to be respective of the dead. The others started taking photographs of the scene, picking up any evidence which could be related to the crime, if it even was a crime, and recording it. Everybody knew that this was going to be difficult because of how contaminated the crime scene was, but they had hope.